Twice, the Nigerian Prison Service has come under intense criticisms for the conduct of its inmates in recent times, and the optics are not looking good. First, the images of prisoners in Ashwebi merrily sending forth a fellow prisoner does not show remorse, but arrogance. The second is that of a young woman who was defrauded by a man currently serving a jail term, with messy details implicating prison officials, a case that finally made it to the Berekete radio program in Abuja. These two cases raise questions about the meaning of incarceration in Nigeria. Presently, Nigeria holds 79,873 inmates, with 65.5% awaiting trial, one of the highest pre-trial detention rates globally. Our prison population rate is 34 per 100,000 people. For every 100,000 Nigerians, 34 are incarcerated. By contrast, the United Kingdom has a rate of 131 per 100,000 people, meaning that 131 people out of every 100,000 residents are in prison in the UK. But despite the UK's high incarceration rate, its prisons maintain stronger internal controls, better staffing ratios, and far lower levels of internal corruption. Their inmates cannot host parties or run scams with the ease we see here. The difference is not the number of prisoners, it is the strength and integrity of the system, because here corruption worsens everything. The 2024 UNODC Corruption Survey shows that millions of Nigerians report direct experiences of bribery and extortion, and these patterns inevitably seep into correctional facilities, with documented cases of warders accepting bribes, granting unauthorized privileges, or even colluding with inmates, thereby undermining discipline and weakening the entire correctional system. A prison system that cannot control its own walls cannot claim to correct anyone. So the Honorable Minister of Interior, Olubomi Tunji Ojo, needs to establish an independent oversight body with disciplinary authority to curb internal corruption. We need to expand structured rehabilitation programs so that our prisons can become centers of reform rather than hubs of idleness and influence. A correctional system that entertains inmates on one hand and enables crime on the other is appalling and, quite honestly, disgraceful. The credibility of our correctional system and the safety of our citizens depend on your decisive action now.
I remember when Bob Brisky, I believe, was apparently sentenced for, was it spraying money?
Yes.
And then we later heard that allegedly he was staying in an apartment, not even in prison. I mean, they said there were some reasons. That's why I use the word, I use the word allegedly. But where a system is not actually a system, it's like there are different systems for different people, there's a problem. But the thing is this, even the process of getting into prison is the people who more often than not did not have enough money to stay out of prison that get there. Even for the prosecution, the implication, if you're looking at just the data, would be that Nigerians are more law-abiding, right? Because there are fewer of us being prosecuted, right, yes. But then we can't even manage our system. So I do agree there's a call for this to be looked at, but it needs proper training. We need even proper prison facilities that don't make criminals like bigger criminals. If 64% or 69% of the people in jail are awaiting trial, so we might actually be manufacturing criminals.
The idea behind prison, and I feel like society needs to understand that there are a lot of things have moved. We've advanced from like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Yeah. But there are some systems that still remain the same. It feels like during the Bible when they were lynching, people that committed crimes. One day I was just kind of like reflecting and I was asking myself, like, about, it was more about heaven and hell, but this kind of like connects to what we're trying to do, what we're talking about. And it's like, if I do something wrong, I'm punished by going to hell, okay. But there's a lot of my life that had nothing to do with me. There's a lot of decisions that were made for me,
on your behalf.
On my behalf, that shaped my reality, that shaped my mentality and my reality. I came into this world, I didn't choose my parents. I didn't choose the environment. I didn't choose to be brought up in Ajegule, where there's a lot of criminals around. I didn't choose all of that. So if those elements made up my mind and my personality, why should I be held responsible when I wasn't part of the choice? Now, these prisoners or these people, most of them, did they decide to be bad people? No. The society played a role. The system played a role. Politics played a role. All of this played a role. What prison should be a correctional center where you take them out to the public because you're protecting society from them because of their mental state. In some cases. In all cases, actually, because if somebody does something wrong, you correct it. You don't throw them in jail and make them worse.
That's right.
Right? So they come out and they repeat the same thing and they do it more because you take them out of a system and put them back into a system that is worse than the system that they came out from. And then you bring them back into the system 4 years or 5 years later and expect them to be different. How does that work? Right? So, I wrote something that I said, prison exists because society hasn't figured out how to prevent harm without force. And they figure out how to do that is the problem. The real purpose of prison should be to protect society while repairing the individual. But too often, it only protects society temporarily while damaging the individual permanently.
I'm going to write on what Nwamaka and Bright said. Nigeria is not a real place because how are inmates doing ashwebi and having a party? I've been trying to comprehend it. No part of it is comprehensible.
Where'd you guys see that?
They did it for that doctor who was let off. What's his name now?
Femi. They had Dr. Femi in the prison.
When he was let off after the appeal case, so then they all were white.
Incarceration in Nigeria is largely for the underprivileged. Yes. We have too many allegations of the privileged being treated differently from choice of accommodation to rights and access. There was a particular person who was a former political officer who was in prison, and then it was like a mecca for a lot of politicians. All his meals were brought from outside. The allegation says he had like a whole mansion for himself. Allegedly, living his best. He was literally still a godfather while in prison. Like Nwamaka said, it's quite sad when the rules are not uniform across the board. We need to have a prison system. Like you said, the Minister of Interior needs to do more in sanitizing that space and ensure that when people are actually in prison, let them be. And then if you want to have privileged prison, let them pay for it officially. Because that is a totally different conversation. If you're privileged, you want special access, let's monetize it and get a proper value out of it. And beyond the corruption in that space, we need reforms that actually reform inmates rather than harden them. When people go into prison, they come back ill-equipped to exist in the real world. And that is where the problem lies. There is like a prison-to-prison pipeline. Most people who get in, they usually go back.
There's a clear example that's working, and it's Norway.
Right.
So in case you want to do research, the people that are in charge of prison, go and check the Norway system. It's literally a proper system where you go through the process, they exclude you from society, but there is a proper system that rehabilitates you back to society.
People will be lining up to go to prison.
Because
it's much better than when people live in Nigeria.
Recently, I got to know some of our people in the correctional facilities. And before then, I had this very negative impression of them. But when I got to know them, the people I was dealing with, they were quite intelligent. And they talked about the programs in the correctional facilities, the things that they create and all that. And they were actually looking for collaboration between the correctional facilities and private sector. The challenge they have is funding. If they have inadequate funding, they can't do a lot of the things that they need to do. And so we might have to start looking at the model which we have in a lot of these countries in the West that we quote, the UK, US. They do private prisons. Prisons are not run by government. They're actually run by private institutions. Again, also, when we talk about the prison population and their awaiting trial, it's not the correctional facilities' fault. It is the judicial system that creates this problem for them, and they have to deal with it. So there has to be a lot of integrated conversations, interagency conversations, and the money question as well.
A remedial system ought to nurture correction. We all said that at the table. At the very least, or it has fallen short from the onset?
Thank you for keeping tabs on those forgotten, Funke. Now here is my offering as promised.